Let us begin with the fundamental principles of counting. Now here we have to study two principles, that is the multiplication principle and addition principle. Let us study first the multiplication principle with the help of few examples. Consider that there are three towns, say town A, B and C. Now to travel from town A to B, say there are three possible routes available, and to travel from town B to C, there are two routes available. Now if we are interested to know in how many ways we can complete the travel from town A to C, then what do we do is, say from A to B, we can complete the travel in three ways, and from B to C, we can complete the travel in two ways. So we know that the total journey can be completed in 3 into 2, that is nothing but 6 ways. So basically what this multiplication principle tells, that if the first part of the journey can be done in 3 ways and the next part can be done in 2 ways, then the entire journey can be completed in 3 into 2, because the two parts of the journey are occurring one after the other in sequence. So that was the first example. Now let's see another example based on the multiplication principle. Now here we have a case of a cinema hall as shown here, which has say 5 doors, and we are interested to know the number of ways in which we can enter and leave the cinema hall under different conditions. So let us see the first condition, that is suppose we want to consider the case of enter and leave by different doors. So that means if a person enters from say D1, then he cannot leave by the same door, he has to leave only by any one of the remaining doors. So the way we count this is basically, if we consider the process of entering, then while entering the person has 5 choices. So therefore there are 5 choices or 5 ways to enter the cinema hall. But now while coming out, while leaving the cinema hall, since it's given that the person must leave by a different door, so now the person has only 4 choices left with him to leave the cinema hall. So therefore now we have only 4 options. So therefore in all there are total 5 into 4, that is 20 different possibilities to enter and leave the cinema hall. Now let's see another case where if we slightly change the condition and say that the person has to enter and leave by any door. So now there is no restriction on which door the person can use to enter and leave. So in this case, as again the previous case, there are 5 choices to enter the cinema hall, and while leaving also now there are 5 choices. So therefore in all now there are 25 ways to enter and leave by any door. And lastly, let's consider one more case where we have a different type of restriction, that is, say it may happen that the person is allowed to enter by only say door 1 and 2, that is any one of the door 1 and 2, and he may leave the cinema hall by any one of the remaining 3 doors, that is door number 3 or 4 or 5. So now here the total number of possibilities are, for entering the cinema hall, as we know there are 2 ways, and for leaving there are 3 ways. So therefore here we have 2 into 3, that is 6 possible ways to enter and leave the cinema hall. So as you can see, we have used the multiplication principle in all the cases under different conditions. Let's go ahead and see another example which relates with the tossing of a coin, say 3 times. And now here we are interested to know how many possible outcomes are there when we toss a coin 3 times. Now as we know, one toss of a coin always results in 2 possible outcomes, that is either heads or tails. So now there is an interesting way of knowing how we can list down all the possible outcomes. So that is by the method of drawing a tree diagram. So here let us see, this is the start. Now when we toss a coin for the first time, it will result into two possibilities, that is heads and tails. Now for each of these possibilities, when we do the next toss, that is the further toss, it will once again have two possible outcomes, that is heads and tails, and here also there is heads and tails. And lastly, on top of it, when we do the third toss, we have once again two possibilities for each of the case here. So we show those two possibilities here. So this is nothing but the tree diagram which shows the various possibilities. Now how do we see the actual outcomes in all these tosses? So here for that we have to trace the tree from the start point to any one of the last, we may say, the leaf of the tree. So as an example, let us see how we can trace one particular path and see the outcome. So if we start off with this particular edge and traveling to the last element, so here we see one possible outcome denoted by H, that is the heads is obtained on all the three tosses. Now as an example, let's see one more path where we start off with the tails, then heads, once again tails. So this is another path, so that is another possible outcome, that is tails, heads and tails. So now how do we count the total number of outcomes? That is, in the first toss we have two possibilities, in the second toss also we had two possibilities, and so in the third toss. And since we are considering all the tosses one after the other simultaneously, as per the multiplication principle, we have to multiply the individual number of possibilities. So that gives us in all 8 outcomes. Now let's see the last example of this. Now say here we have to keep the 4 books on a shelf, that is physics, chemistry, maths and English. And we want to know in how many ways we can place them on a shelf. So once again, if we consider the 4 positions by say these dashes, and let's try to figure out, that is the first position can be filled in 4 ways because we can keep any one of the 4 books there. Now, after keeping that book in this leftmost position, now if we think of filling up the next position, we have only 3 books left with us. So that can be done in 3 ways. So as we can see, the next position can be filled in 2 ways. And the last book has to be kept in the last position. So there is just one way to do that. So hence in all, we have 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. That is total 24 ways to keep these 4 books on a shelf. So that's the multiplication principle. Now we will summarize the multiplication principle now with the formal statement.